Hello, builders. We would love to welcome you to this episode of the Build Your Success podcast. Here at the Build Your Success podcast, we like to build you so you can build others. We do that through our coaching, training, and speaking, and then we also do that with our special guest. Today, we have Arthur Carmazzi. Arthur is ranked number one in the world as an influential thought leader in organizational culture for 2021 by Global Gurus. As a best-selling author and founder of the Directive Communication Psychology, Arthur's gamification methodologies have influenced the training and leadership development industry through his unique game-based psychological approaches. 13 books, including Amazon's number one new release, Game On, Reinventing Organizational Culture with Gamification. So welcome to the podcast today, Arthur.
Well, thank you so much, Brian. I'm glad to be here.
This is an interesting episode. We're going to talk about gamification. But before we do that, I'm going to ask you what we ask all of our guests. What does leadership and being a leader mean to Arthur Carmazzi?
Wow. Okay. So there's all these people that got the leadership models, right? So I personally believe in the leadership anti-model. Okay. So first of all, let's just take, for example, if you got the CEO of Citibank and you replaced him with the CEO of Google, chances are that there probably wouldn't really be, that there would be some kind of a disconnect in both leaders, even though they may be great at leading their current organization, because essentially they don't fit into the same culture. You're going to have potentially a disconnect. So you can't necessarily say that a good leader in one place is going to be a good leader in another place. And also, the idea of having specific standard leadership competencies doesn't necessarily work either. I mean, if you've ever, been in a situation, you go to this leadership training, you're like really excited and you're going to put all of these things in there and it might not really kind of fit with you, but you're going to try it anyway. And then you end up kind of just giving up and kind of messing up because people think you're kind of inauthentic. And so then you kind of eventually go back to how you were. It's kind of like when people go on diets and gain weight, right? So what happens is that, or what we believe is that a leadership model is one that needs to be created based on who you are at your best, okay, and connecting that to the culture you're in order for you to really be able to create the ideal leadership model.
That is wonderful. First time I've heard that. We get a lot of repetition on this question, but that's unique there. What I'm hearing from you is like a DNA of the culture, and so the leader has to lead the group, and there's a culture associated with that. And so in your application, you said each idea leadership identity is not a set of rules, but a connection with who you are your best and how you interact with the culture you exist in. So very similar to the way you wrote it out several weeks ago, but it's just, I'm hearing here it's a signature. And I love that because I really believe that it depends on the signature of the traits of the leader and then also the organization and culture he or she is trying to lead.
Absolutely. And you'll notice this happens even naturally in certain groups, right? You'll find some teams or groups or friends where somebody will automatically just kind of take on the leadership role, but that same person in a different group does not. Okay, so it's not necessarily going to be about whether you have the specific skills or even the alpha mentality. It also has a lot to do with the group dynamics that you're in.
Yes. Yeah. And I like to say you can choose to be a leader, but someone else has to choose for you to lead them.
Absolutely. That's excellent. I like it.
Yeah, that's the way it works. But hey, listen, you have this gamification thing. So let's talk about what is work gamification? Give us the definition of work gamification.
All right, work gamification. Okay, so first of all, work gamification is not about playing games. Work gamification. See, here's the thing, okay? Right now, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all of these things, they have essentially gamified your life, okay? And basically all they've done is they've taken your content, which is, what you create, your ideas, your whatever, and they have basically connected measurement to it and created a system where other people can measure you by liking, sharing, commenting. And essentially that is gamification at its primitive level. Okay. But you're not playing a game. You are executing something that is part of who you are, and then you are measured based on the value you are providing to others. So let's look at the idea of work gamification. Okay. Work gamification has an objective. There's a goal, right? So you have this goal and you have to achieve this goal. Now, that goal could be sales, it could be zero customer problems, it could be improving the communication between organizations or between departments. There could be a lot of different elements that are connected to those goals, but eventually you still have some objective. Now, in order to really build on that, okay, rather than kind of creating some kind of, oh, okay, well, you've got points for this or anything else, it's based on the results you get. See, the thing is, the reason why Facebook and all of these places, all these social medias have succeeded is because you literally get instant results, instant gratification. You can see exactly what's going on and what you're doing, and this affects your kind of sense of achievement, right? And so as you're kind of getting, this whole thing where you're moving forward, what happens is that you essentially are getting engaged in that social media because you are essentially feeling better about yourself. Now, in a situation where you've got a goal, okay, well, it's the same kind of thing, okay, except that you have, rather than measuring the result, you're measuring the implemented behaviors that will ultimately help you to achieve that goal. Okay. And the reason is because in order to actually get this consistent kind of sense of achievement, it has to be instant. It has to be now. I mean, especially now when, we're in the age of instant. So you can't just wait for 3 months or 2 months or, the next annual review to find out how you're doing. By creating creative and fun ways of measuring you as you create the behaviors that ultimately are reverse engineered from those objectives, that essentially is how gamification works. That's kind of a long definition, but yeah, it's essentially a system of measurement that creates or that supports an objective in a fun way.
I like that explanation, and it makes me think about, I teach a course on plan, purpose, length, action, and negotiate. And part of that, I talk about milestones and meeting, celebrating milestones.
Absolutely.
And I think that, Arthur, when you talk about, how social media has done this, that's a great way to show it. As, when you get a like or someone comments immediately and you get that gratification from that. And if we could take that same thing into the workplace and give people immediate gratification for jobs they've done, objectives they've met, I love that. I think that's something that, too often people are just saying, great job. But well, great job for what?
Yeah.
And so I think you could do a better job of defining what those things are. And that leads into something you have here. You talk about clarity and you say how your brain interprets information and gets clarity. So let's talk about that. Let's unpack how someone, the brain interprets information and how it gets clarity, because I think that's important with goals as well.
Absolutely. Okay. So some of the research we've done deals with the brain's genetic ambiguity relief process, okay, which essentially is the genetic way that your brain gets clarity. Now, I just want to share that this is not personality. This is literally just one thing. It's how your brain gets clarity. Now, the process of how you do it is not necessarily defined by the behavior. So, for example, okay, when you are getting clarity in a chaotic process, okay, that basically means that in your way of getting clarity, you actually have to put stuff together, and it's like here, it's here, it's here, here. And what we call a chaotic process, or what we call green brain in the colored brain model that measures the ambiguity relief process, is you actually, the green brain needs to take action. And so once they take action, or they get feedback, or they say, hey, what do you think about this, or what do you think about that, or and start moving on stuff and trying stuff out, okay, that's how they get clarity. Now, of course, because the green brain is trying to always do things and trying things out, they make more mistakes than any other brain processor. But because they're constantly moving, it's so easy for them to say, oh my gosh, this doesn't work. No sweat. I'll just take that, put this back, put this one in, and keep on moving. And so even though they may have made a mistake, sometimes nobody even notices, or sometimes because they consistently moving, a mistake that has happened eventually ends up being a better way of doing something in the future that they figure out. Okay. Now, another process of getting clarity would be the relational process. Now, in this particular case, everything is connected, but it's connected through data. Well, for example, with the chaotic processing, nothing is connected, and you have to connect it through action. So with the relational process, because everything is connected, this is what we consider a passive process. Okay, even though with relational, you have to get lots of information. So you get information, you get data, you get data, you get data, more information, more information, more information. So even though that you're getting all of this information, what's happening is that in your brain, it's kind of all coming together, and it's creating these options. Okay, you don't have to try to figure out what the options are. The options simply appear because it's a passive process that comes from the data. And once you've got all of this stuff, and it's like, okay, now I see option 1, I see option 2, option 3, right? And of course, if you choose option 2 and that didn't work out, you're still okay, because you've got these other options, and maybe just get a little extra information and keep on moving forward. And then we have what is called linear processing. Okay, now linear processing, okay, so this is essentially about structure. The more structure you have, the easier it is to get clarity. So when something has clearly defined values or lines, or if there's a process that's do this, then it becomes simple, easy, clear. It's just that sometimes when you're in a situation, you don't necessarily have that, and that can be a little bit frustrating. So what happens is that if the linear process or red brain does not have the clarity, or does not have that structure, they have to create the structure. And of course, that also, because there's that structure, there's that process that is generally, do this, which is very logical. And sometimes, of course, the red brains actually make the least mistakes of any other brain color. But if they do make a mistake, it usually ends up taking a lot longer to recover from that mistake, because it's like, oh, wait a minute, I got to start over, because obviously this was here, and this was here, and this was here, and it's not working, so there must be something wrong. Okay, and so then, of course, the other processor would be considered intuitive processing. Now, you know what intuition is, right? It's like this: the universe is talking to you and kind of giving you this energy, right? Or it could actually be that your brain's subconscious has picked up on a whole bunch of stuff, and what ends up happening is that your brain, you don't consciously know that you know stuff, but your brain has all of this subconscious experience. So then when something just feels right, you're actually accessing this subconscious experience that you had. I mean, for example, let's say, like 3 years ago, you were in the supermarket buying cantaloupes, and there was these people talking behind you, and you didn't really pay any attention because you were focusing on your cantaloupe. But, about 3 months later, you saw this thing about Bitcoin. You said, I'm going to buy some Bitcoin. And you didn't know why, but it just felt right. Now, suddenly, Bitcoin's like $50,000 or whatever. And like you made tons of money. And it turns out that those guys that were in the back of the cantaloupe section were actually Bitcoin experts or something. And that even though your conscious mind didn't pick it up, your subconscious did, and it felt right when you were exposed to it again. So that's where the quote intuition comes from, right? So with intuitive processing, it's kind of like everything is also connected, but it's kind of connected through this sense of what's going on. I'll go over here, you've got this over there. So people with intuitive processing are also very empathetic because they can pick up on things that other people don't pick up on as well. And when they do something, when they get clarity, the way they get clarity essentially is through reflection and kind of connecting everything, because when they reflect, everything that they feel, see, everything that happened before, everything that's happening now is all kind of connected. Now the thing is that the biggest problems come from where people expect that my way, obviously, of getting clarity is common sense, because I mean it's just obvious. I mean, it's always worked for you, right? So if you're a chaotic processing person, I mean, it's, come on, man, let's just do it. Do the Nike thing, man. Let's just do it. Well, you've got your linear processors. Like, what are you talking about? We need structure. We need to have this before we can do anything. We have to have the clarity. We have to have the structure. Well, the green brain, the chaotic processing is like, oh my gosh, structure. That's just so confining. How can you stand it? And the other guy's going, oh my gosh, how can you just jump into stuff that is just so reckless? And of course, there is this thing where even if you're not kind of like screaming at each other, there's this element where you just don't trust that person. And you don't know why you don't trust them. It's just that they just seem to be wrong. And they seem to not have common sense according to your version of how you get clarity. Now, remember that this affects the way that you will ultimately treat people subconsciously and consciously, and people pick up on it. And you can feel it when people basically don't trust you. And of course, that creates lack of synergy. And then eventually, of course, people blame you for doing things in the wrong way. And then you're just like, okay, never mind. You tell me what to do, I'll do it. And that crushes innovation. It crushes the potential of proactive action and all kinds of things that basically go wrong because people are judging each other. They're actually being brain racists without even realizing it.
Unbelievable. As you started talking about that and you expounded on it, you beat me to my question, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it anyway. I think of myself, I'm a guy of action. I talked about that plan, purpose, linked action, negotiate. That action, I like to have action, and sometimes I make a decision too quickly. But on the other side of that, people that have a lot of thought process going into stuff, sometimes they're paralyzed by all the decisions. And so I think if you can find people on your team and complement each other and recognize, hey, his strength is to ask clarifying questions and make sure, hey, we're not jumping off the cliff here. We're just taking a nice dive and having fun. When you talked about the linear stuff, I think of a flow chart, if this, then this, if this, then that. And a lot of people work well with that. And it helps, when you have processes in place that can be. But then there's also those times where you get something new that you got to make a decision on. And I love this thing that's I heard it bouncing around in my mind, and I got to make a decision quick. Like sometimes we call that shooting from the hip, and that can get you in trouble or make you a hero. It just depends on the outcome, the circumstances. So that's just wonderful. So in your application here, and for our guests and those that are listening, if you ever want to be a guest on our show, go to our website, buildcs.net. Go to the guest application, fill out the guest application. We'll consider you for the show. But in Arthur's application, he said the motivational and core culture mix that affects competence and purpose. What is motivational and cultural mix? Define that for our listeners.
All right. So first of all, I mean, there's motivation. See, here's the thing. When you hire people, the way that a lot of people hire people is they hire them based on competency. Okay. But I'm sure you've seen this, or at least I've seen this, hundreds of times, where you get like a super competent individual. Maybe they, came from some super Ivy League university or somewhere, and then they go into this team, and the team is already, highly successful, and so they bring this new in, and then suddenly, after a few weeks, you have the entire team falling apart. Okay, and people are wondering why. No, we've got all these high performers in there. Well, so see, the thing is that it's like, okay, let's just look at high performers in the food industry. All right, so pizza is a high performer. I mean, everybody loves pizza, right? Okay, and you can put all kinds of, you can put some pepperoni, some cheese, okay, maybe some anchovies if you're brave, okay, on your pizza. You can have a lot of different kinds of things on your pizza. Now let's look at another high performer in the food industry. Let's look at chocolate ice cream. Okay, now you take some chocolate ice cream, maybe you put some sprinkles, maybe a little bit of coconut cream on top. You can, dress it up with, some nice honey and maybe a little whipped cream, all kinds of stuff you can do with chocolate ice cream. But if you take high performer pizza and you put chocolate ice cream on the pizza, there's just something wrong with that. Okay, and that's what happens with teams and organizations. It's called, and this is where people need to look at cultural and motivational fit. See, now the colored brain, which is one of the, what I was talking about with the clarity processing, okay, that's part of it, okay, because that kind of gets you helping people to be aware of that in the first place, gets them ready to kind of understand each other, and not be brain racists. Okay. Then there's also the element of what kind of a culture do you ultimately want to create, and do you have gamified work processes that support that, right? And now you're looking at, okay, so you've got what kind of culture you've got. You understand a little bit more about how your team is getting clarity. Now the next thing is understanding their motivational fit. Okay, so sometimes. Okay, and this is completely predictable. And I mean, there's this entire course on this, so I can't really go into all of the details, but in general, it's absolutely predictable. You can basically play a game of cards with somebody, and these are like the cards that we use, right? Okay, so and all these cards just have pictures on them, and you just ask simple questions, and it's a game, right? And what happens is that you can identify, okay, from a 7-minute little conversation playing with some cards, you can identify somebody's complete motivational mix, okay? Why they do things. So colored brain, for example, is how you do things, okay? So that gives you how. Now, if you understand why people do things and you combine it with how they do things, that gives you a really big insight. And when it gives you, and when you understand that about all the different people in the team, well, now you can see the conflicts, and you can see the potential synergies, and you can see how or how not they will fit together. And of course, this also works for marriages or previous to marriage. I guess if you're married, it's already a little late. But you've got this potential to literally understand what we call emotional drive, okay, and your primary motivator. So, for example, if you've got somebody that has a high emotional drive for security and control. They want to be safe. They don't want to, rock the boat too much. But they don't like to they like to know what's going to happen, right? And do things in a specific way. And it's got to, this is the way I've done it, and so on. And then you also have maybe that, let's say that they also have a personal sense of recognition where they like to be recognized. And all of this kind of combines to basically create somebody that is going to be, well, I know I'm right, and you should do it my way, right? And if they have a high emotional drive for excellence, it's like it better be perfect. Okay, so then you can have somebody that's not necessarily going to be that easy to work with, unless you have complementary type of people who basically can deal with that. And that also comes into the right motivational mix, right? Because not everybody's going to be a leader, and even just like we were talking about before in leadership, you'll get a group. Some people will just come out as what we call the axis leader, and the reason that they do that is because, first of all, they have some kind of motivational connection to everybody. So maybe this guy, this guy's got some motivated for security. This guy's is motivated for personal growth. This person's motivated for achievement. Okay, so you've got different things that people are maybe motivated with, and this guy's got a little bit of everything. So I'm like, okay, I can understand, I can connect, but that person is also connected more to the ultimate objective, and so therefore that person will literally automatically rise as a leader in that group.
Wow, that is awesome. We are at the end of the podcast. I do want to do a few summaries here. You talked about, someone getting hired and causing these problems. I heard that summarized one time as we hire someone for their aptitude and we fire them for their attitude. That's a true statement. I've seen that happen time and time again. You're singing my song when you talk about supplementing each other's personality types and traits. It's, when you get an organization group of people together, if you realize everyone has strengths and everyone has blind spots, and if we can complement each other and work together, then we can make a team go forward. That's just wonderful. Well, Arthur, how can the listeners get in contact with you? Where can they find you on social media? Just give us that stuff.
No, actually, look me up on Google, Arthur Carmazzi, spelled with a C. But if you want to find out more about like your colored brain, you can go to coloredbrain.com. If you want to find out more about organizational culture, you can go to cultureevolution.com. If you want to find out more about me personally, go to carmazzi.net. Okay. And there's directivecommunication.com is like the bigger company. Because we've got over 600 licensed directive communication psychology trainers and consultants and coaches in 28 different countries. And of course, if you're interested in that, you can, easily find out. Just go to trainthetrainer.asia.
Awesome. Well, for our listeners, we'll include that in the show notes. We appreciate you listening to the Build Your Success podcast today. Listen, do us a favor. Go over to wherever you're listening to this podcast. Leave us an honest review and rating and share this podcast with others. I believe Arthur has dropped some real gold nuggets. Hey, we didn't finish his whole application, so we may have to have him back on the show sometime. Thanks for listening to the podcast today. Remember to build yourself and then build others.